Good afternoon, everyone. We are interrupting the game for just a moment here because there is major breaking news at this hour. ABC News has just learned that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is believed to have been killed in the attack in Iran. President Trump just moments ago confirming the news in a social media post. Killed in that attack led by U.S. and Israeli forces. The 86-year-old cleric had served as supreme leader since 1989, more than 30 years. The U.S. and Israel say they targeted Khamenei and the rest of Iran's top leadership in massive strikes that began early this morning. Israel saying just hours ago that it would continue to target the regime until it has been eliminated. Our Rachel Scott asking the president in a phone conversation late today how long this would last. He said that the outcome, the timeline of this could depend on when the U.S. confirmed that the supreme leader was in fact dead. Also, Rachel asking the president who will lead Iran next. President Trump telling Rachel that he did not want to explain, but that we have a beautiful plan. I want to get right to our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, live at the White House tonight. Mary, what have you learned?
David, the president announcing Khamenei's death in a lengthy social media post. Just now, I want to read through to you what the president is saying. He says, Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei and his gang of bloodthirsty thugs. He was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems. And working closely with Israel, there was not a thing he or the other leaders that have been killed along with him could do. The president goes on, David, to repeat the claims that we heard him make overnight shortly after this attack for regime change. The president saying this is the single greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. The big question has been, what does that look like? How does the U.S. and how does President Trump envision that playing out? The president says that hopefully the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves. But David, the president concludes this statement by saying that the heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world.
For days and weeks to come, and Mary, once this attack was underway today, the president with a stark warning to the American people about U.S. troops.
Yeah, and David, the president, of course, remember, he has long promised not to drag America into these long, protracted foreign wars. But now the president has warned that American lives may be lost in this fight. We do not know how long this is going to go on, whether this will indeed be a long, protracted, prolonged war. The president making clear for now the attack, the strikes will continue, but there are still so many basic fundamental questions about what comes next and what role the U.S. is going to play in the future of Iran, David.
Again, we're going to get back to this hockey game in just moments here. Mary Bruce live at the White House. Mary, thank you. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, from the region tonight. Ian, President Trump moments ago confirming that the supreme leader of Iran is dead.
Yeah, a truly momentous day. If anyone had any doubts what this operation was really about, well, now we know it is regime change. And that has seemed clear pretty much since the first early hours this morning when the president made that pre-recorded address. The attacks have not stopped coming all day from Iran. We're in an air raid shelter at the moment. We're getting air raid alerts about every 10 to 15 minutes. And that's been the case throughout the day, multiple attacks. I think there are a lot of questions now. What comes next inside Iran? Remember, it wasn't just about the supreme leader. It was about an entire edifice that ran the country for almost 50 years since the Islamic Revolution back in 1979. The Israelis are also saying that a significant number of Iran's defense leadership have also been killed in strikes that have taken place today. But there is this enormous security apparatus that has bought in to the regime, the IRGC. The president's talking about them being part of the solution. I think many Iranians, especially those who've given up their lives in recent weeks to call for change, will see the IRGC as part of the problem. Then you have the Basij, this paramilitary force, who are the brutal enforcers out on the streets. You sometimes see them on motorbikes, shooting people at point-blank range, driving into crowds. There is a lot there. There are a lot of people who had a vested interest in the current system, and it won't just be a case of decapitating the leadership and hoping that everything changes. All power, all violent power, in other words, all arms belong in the hands of the regime. The opposition doesn't have any power. But make no mistake, I think for so many Iranians, this is going to be a truly emotional day. This is a day that they've been waiting for so many years, a sign that finally, perhaps, the regime is coming to an end. And wherever this ends up, however many days it takes, the shape of the Middle East will have changed forever. David.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, coming to us live. That's from an air raid shelter. He's reporting from Israel tonight. Ian, thank you. One more note on this from Rachel Scott, because Rachel spoke with President Trump late today. Rachel, he told you that he was with the generals when you were on the phone with him. You asked if the supreme leader was dead. He said, "We believe he is." He didn't want to confirm at that point on the phone with you, but he must have seen the evidence right there in front of him where he was gathered with the generals, and now has confirmed it for the American people.
Yes, David, it was clear that the president was monitoring the situation. He told me flat out that he was surrounded by the generals. He said, "We believe the supreme leader is dead," but he wanted to wait. Now the president giving that confirmation to the American people. David, I also asked the president, why now? Was there an imminent threat to the United States? The president told me he believed, quote, there was a threat. He went on to praise Operation Midnight Hammer that happened months ago. But again, the president had insisted that the nuclear sites were completely obliterated. The president acknowledged that, but then he said that Iran was trying to build back. He says that would pose an imminent threat to the United States. And then, of course, I asked him that question, what happens now, David? What exactly happens now? Who takes over Iran? The president said that he didn't want to get into that, but said we, quote, have a very beautiful plan, David.
And of course, that beautiful plan would go up against whatever the regime had planned itself in case this actually happened. Obviously, they knew that the supreme leader could be targeted at some point. That, in fact, played out today with this U.S. and Israeli attack, and whether or not the regime has plans for who they believe should take over next and how this works over these next couple of days and weeks ahead. You asked the president about a timeline. He wasn't comfortable offering a timeline here either.
No timeline on just how long the United States could possibly be involved in this. The president said earlier, speaking to other reporters, that he believes that he has multiple off-ramps here. But, David, what is clear, there is a lot of questions ahead, including the involvement of U.S. troops potentially on the ground, David.
But again, the big news, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, is dead in a U.S. Israeli strike. Our thanks to Rachel Scott, Ian Pannell, the entire team with us here today, Mary Bruce at the White House, our whole team standing by for a special edition of World News Tonight, right after the hockey game tonight. And of course, stepped up security across the United States. We'll get into that reporting tonight as well, and whether or not they believe there is any threat here in the homeland. I'm David Muir here at ABC News in New York. We'll return you now to the game. Our thanks to the team at ESPN, and I'll see you for World News Tonight. Good day.